we've said, the jury in this case has spoken. I'm disappointed, but it sparked a national debate on important issues facing our country and is also sparking action. We're seeing rallies and marches around the country with protesters calling for justice and change. The rallies are bringing us together, and they're shining a national spotlight on Florida's so-called Stand Your Ground law. It's the controversial law that allows people to use deadly force if they reasonably believe their safety is threatened. Critics call it the Shoot First law. It was pushed and created by the National Rifle Association, and the NRA has been the driving force behind the law. In 2005, the NRA first got Stand Your Ground on the books in Florida. Since then, it's systematically pushed the law in more than 30 states. And now the world is seeing exactly why this law needs to change. Joining me now is Florida defense attorney Ken Paterwitz. Thank you for coming on the show, Ken.
Thank you.
Now, Ken, you know this law better than most. You've defended clients using it. Tell us, what effect does Stand Your Ground have in Florida?
Well, some people have said that the Stand Your Ground law has nothing to do with this case, and I don't know, it is so far off the mark, I don't know what they've been smoking. It has everything to do with this case, and for three reasons. The first reason is because there was no arrest made in this case because the police and the state attorney for that county believed that the Stand Your Ground law prevented them from making an arrest. And that in and of itself was part of this case and part of this trial, and any other type of case similar to this. Second reason, at the end of the trial, the jury instructions in this case specifically told the jury that they were sworn to follow that a person has the right to stand their ground, as opposed to prior to 2005, when I handled many murder prosecutions, and the law to the jury was different, which said that an individual had to use every means possible to avoid the confrontation before resorting to that force. So two main reasons why Stand Your Ground applied in this case, and on all other cases, many people would say this is a horrible law. It's not an accident, Reverend, that the Florida Prosecuting Attorneys Association, representing all the state attorneys in Florida, have recommended the repeal of this law.
Now, they've recommended the repeal of the law today. Even the mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg, put out this statement saying, one fact has long been crystal clear: shoot first laws like those in Florida can inspire dangerous vigilantism and protect those who act recklessly with guns. Such laws drafted by gun lobby extremists in Washington encourage deadly confrontation by enabling people to shoot first and argue justifiable homicide later. There's clearly the beginning of this case was on Stand Your Ground from the night at the police station when Stand Your Ground was the reason they let George Zimmerman go.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's an old saying that us lawyers have heard many times, and most people have heard, driving while black. Well, this case, many people are now saying it's walking while black. It's now changed. And that's a horrifying thing. You know, we can't ignore facts. The facts are that since 2005, when this law was enacted in Florida, there's a 200% increase in homicides where the claim is self-defense. 200%. Now, if that's the case, we need to take a real hard look at this law, because what a lawyer has to tell their clients is, if you are in a situation with a gun and you're in a place you're allowed to be, you better shoot that person right through the heart and kill them, not just injure them. Kill them, so that no one can refute your claim that you were standing your ground and you were defending yourself. And, you know, that's a shame if that's what our society has come to. That's how bad this law is. And that's why the prosecutors in the state of Florida, all over the state, represented by the Florida Prosecuting Attorneys Association, want it repealed.
Ken Paterwitz, thank you for your time. And putting the spotlight on, making national and making people understand what is going on in an egregious way is what marches and protests do. It is why we went to Sanford in the first place. Marching and protests do not solve problems, but it exposes problems, big problems, and no one will deal with things unless they're exposed. Joining me now are two that engage in that is the Reverend Dr. W. Franklin Richardson, chairman of the Conference of National Black Churches. He's also chairman of the board of the National Action Network, my civil rights organization, and Pastor Jamal Harrison Bryant from the Empowerment Movement. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you, Reverend.
The activism that both of you were involved with me in the beginning around these big issues and around this case, and now going forward, has always been nonviolent, and we insist on that. But it also must deal with leading to real fundamental change. Dr. Richardson.
You know, the change is critical. We've been here before. Too often have we been where we are now, in a place of disappointment and frustration. What the black church has to do, and the leadership, must be an incubator for that frustration and transfer it into opportunity with strategic action. We've got to take up this responsibility. Our people are frustrated. They're looking for some sense of direction. Where do we go from here? How do we address this? It seems overwhelming that here we are over and over again, 50 years from 1963. We're back at the same place all over again. High unemployment in the black community, voter acts gone, black men being killed and not being accountable. This is recurring, it's frustrating, but the church must incubate our disappointment and turn it into opportunity.
Reverend Bryant, as we look at this 50 years later and we're getting ready, Martin Luther King III and all of us come together to march and deal with the issues of today, voting rights and equal protection under the law. The challenge is with activism today is to put that spotlight on not only these particular cases, which clearly is front and center in the minds of the nation now because people like us went to Florida, but also to deal with stand your ground laws and other laws, which laws were changed in the 60s when there was discipline and strategic activism.
Well, one of the critical places, Reverend Sharpton, as we celebrate the 50th anniversary, is what made Magic Johnson a great player was not all of his shots, but his ability to pass. Our marching is the first step. Martin Luther King Jr. did an incredible job, but we cannot forget the legacy of Thurgood Marshall. He marched all the way to the point guard line, and then Thurgood Marshall had to help pass the law. What we've done in this past year is to raise attention on Stand Your Ground, and now we've got to move forward to begin changing the law. That's why we're standing with you Saturday in 100 cities, in front of federal courts in 100 cities, to raise attention about how it is that laws have got to change, and the federal government is going to have to investigate. The reality is Florida has dropped the ball, and the Department of Justice is going to have to pick it up.
State law and states that have, like the Stand Your Ground law, it was state laws that was confronted in the 60s.
Yes.
And here we are again. And I think that we must not miss the bigger points as we deal with the family, as Trayvon Martin and others, pursuing something, and the contradictions we're getting ready to talk about with the Alexander case. But also, Dr. Richardson, how we handle our protests. One of the things that I saw over the weekend with protests that we saw or were involved in was they were mostly all peaceful, and which is very important. Yet we heard all the rhetoric from many on the right. They're going to be riots, almost like they were stereotyping a whole community, like they couldn't handle a verdict without being reckless.
Los Angeles, for instance, the police were out just like they're expecting us to go to war. We've been responsible people. Our people have been accountable. We've always sought the system to correct our indifference. And I think it's unfortunate when we get caught with this idea that somehow when we stand up again for our rights, that we're calling for violence and chaos. We have calmed the chaos. And that must be our role as we go forward.
And it's like a collective profiling, Reverend Bryant. You have brought out a lot of young people with all of this. These young people are not thugs and hoodlums that cannot operate with discipline, protest, and focus where they're going.
Aristotle said something very key. He said a wise man knows how to be angry at the right degree, at the right person, and at the right time. Our young people have done an exemplary job of modeling Civil Rights 2.0. You all would know that in order for you to participate in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, you had to go through weeks of training before they allowed you to picket or be able to hold up your voice or your mantle to make sure that you could, in fact, undergird the principles of of nonviolence. By and large, the thousands of young people in Reverend Sharpton, we've been all over the country from Los Angeles to New York to Miami. These young people have done it without training, but they have a level of maturity and discipline that says they understand our anger has to be at the right degree and towards the right target. Our hats go off to this next generation of civil rights activists who understand that we've got to march forward, but even with our rage, it's got to be directed in the right way.
Reverend Richardson, it is also not now and has never been a all-black movement. There are many whites that have marched on this, many Latinos, many Asians. As in the 60s, we're talking about right and wrong, even though we're dealing with questions of race, even though we're dealing in sometimes questions of gender, homophobia, whatever it is, it's about all people standing for what's right.
It's clearly, we have multiple dimensions to this struggle. And it just happens to be that the African Americans' oppression in America provided the framework and the ground for many causes of liberation to take place. And whether it's in South Africa or in the Berlin Wall falling down, wherever, it grew out of our ability to respond to our oppression and the racism that has been inflicted on us in this country.
Well, Reverend Dr. W. Franklin Richardson and Pastor Jamal Harrison Bryant, I'm happy to have both of you with us tonight, and ministers and activists around the country will be in 100 cities in front of federal buildings this Saturday, saying that we must deal with these state laws and we must call on the Justice Department to look into the civil rights violation and this case, and they will be gathering around the country. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Ahead, the woman serving 20 years for firing a shot that hit a wall, yet others go free. How is this justice in America? That's next.